Every setback in life provides you a golden opportunity if you know what to look for. And in this video, I am going to detail two case studies from two NBA legends who both dealt with catastrophic setbacks in their careers and how they were able to find the opportunity hidden within them and scale new heights because of the fuel that these setbacks provided to them. I'm also going to detail my thoughts on setback, my experiences, and how you can better see setback so that you can utilize it properly if you're going through something right now or inevitably when you go through something in the future. Because let's face it, setback is a part of life. And if you can't handle it properly, you're simply not going to get very far and you're not going to enjoy this experience. So with that being said, the first case study I want to dive into is the story of Kobe Bryant. See, Kobe Bryant was a high draft pick in 1996. He was traded to the Lakers, but his career didn't start off super hot. He was a bench player. He averaged 5, 7, 10, 12 points his first 3 years or so. But eventually, he did crack the starting lineup, and he started to develop. And he turned into an all-star, and then he turned into a superstar. And in the years 2000, 2001, and 2002, him and Shaq won 3 straight titles. After the third, Kobe was on top of the world. He could do no wrong. But that's where things took a negative turn. He had a little bit of an off-court situation. Not going to dive into that. If you know the story, you know the story. If not, look up Kobe Bryant's off-court stuff. You'll find it online. You can read up on it. But he was dealing with an off-court situation that had him going to court every now and again. At the time, he was also feuding with Shaq more. Who was the alpha dog? Who was the 1A? Who was the 1B? Who was the superstar on the team? Whose team was it? They were having a little bit of a beef. And the roster was in flux. By 2004, they added Karl Malone. They added Gary Payton, 2 veterans that were good, but kind of injury-riddled, a little bit slow, and past their prime. In any case, 2004 ended in a terrible fashion. The Lakers lost to, at the time, a team that was considered much worse than them, the Detroit Pistons. Now, of course, we know in hindsight that Kobe and Shaq, with an old roster, a fragile roster, versus this Detroit Pistons team that was balanced, that was great defensively, that was very talented, was probably a much more even matchup than it was perceived to be at the time. But in 2004, it was a big upset when they lost in 5 games. And in the offseason, the Lakers decided to move on from Shaq so that Kobe could be the sole focus of the team because, well, him and Shaq just couldn't coexist any longer. Now, Kobe had already taken a few L's here, but he took another one when Shaq won his first championship in Miami, his 4th total, with Dwayne Wade. You should look up the highlights of Dwayne Wade because he deserves more respect. If not for his knee injuries, Dwayne Wade probably would have been the 2nd greatest shooting guard of all time, might have been even better than Jordan. That's what I think. But of course, we'll never know. Maybe I'm crazy. In any case, Kobe was pissed. And he said so in an interview with Shaq whenever they actually made up in the year 2018, 2019, something like that. He said he was real pissed. And he had a chance to avenge himself in 2008 when the Lakers finally cobbled together a good roster that wasn't the 8th seed or missing the playoffs. They finally got to the finals. And they played the super team Celtics, the big 3 Celtics with Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, Kevin Garnett. They played this super team. And they lost in a really bad way. It was 6 games, so it wasn't a blowout, but the last game, tough to stomach, especially if you're a Lakers fan. Tough to stomach. 40-point loss in Boston versus your arch rivals. That's tough. That's tough. And Kobe was real pissed. I could not imagine what was in his head at that point. But he took that one personally. And in 2009, he came back and won his first title because of it. Because he worked harder than he ever did in his life. He was more focused than ever in his life. Because he knew he was not going out without getting his revenge. And he won in 2009 versus the Orlando Magic. But that wasn't enough for him because he had to avenge himself personally against the Celtics. And in 2010, he did. Through a shaking shooting performance in Game 7, really throughout the whole series. He was injured, but shaky shooting, it didn't matter. They won in 7 games. And Kobe got his revenge. He surpassed Shaq in NBA titles. And he cemented his legacy as the greatest player in some people's eyes, at least the 2nd greatest shooting guard, and for a lot of people, at least a top 10 player of all time, if not top 5. Those setbacks fueled him to scale new heights. And that's exactly what LeBron James did right after Kobe Bryant went through his hero's arc. See, LeBron was the darling coming into the NBA. Yeah, his teammates didn't really love him so much because they thought he was overhyped, or too much hype for a high schooler. Proved them wrong. It's on the record, by the way. They can't hide from that. His teammates didn't really like him at first because of the hype, but then he came in and he started dominating. They were like, oh, this guy's pretty fucking good. And then second year, 27 points a game, 27, 7, and 7. He was fantastic. Third year, fantastic. Fourth year, NBA Finals, I believe. Fourth year NBA Finals, 2007 versus the Spurs. Got swept, but nobody really expected him to win anyways because they were outmatched. Let's be fair. They were. They were quadruple teaming him off the pick and roll. What do you expect? Plus, those games were tight, right? Some of those games were tight. The last game was a 2-point game, 3-point game. So he was exceeding expectations at this point. But then he failed to reach the finals 2 straight years. And whenever he looked around at the roster, he decided that the roster wasn't good enough. And so he took his talents to South Beach. You might remember the press conference. This was actually the year that Kobe Bryant won the title versus the Celtics. This was the same offseason. He took his talents to South Beach. And then he made a pretty critical error. He guaranteed that he'd win not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7, not 8, not 30 championships. He said he was going to win every championship for the rest of foreseeable time. That was a bad mistake. That was a bad error. And he paid for it whenever that year they lost in 6 games to the Dallas Mavericks. I actually remember crying during that series because I was a kid and I simply didn't understand how a player as dominant as LeBron James could get locked up by someone my height. My height now, not my height then, but my height now. I just didn't get it. I just didn't understand. And I simply couldn't accept it. And you know, that was kind of what LeBron did too. He locked himself up in the house. He said it himself. He locked himself up in the house and he just didn't do shit. He just looked himself in the mirror and he said, what the fuck am I doing? How do I get locked up by JJ Barea? No disrespect to JJ Barea, but there's levels. There's levels here. I mean, come on now. 99 out of 100 times. But that was the one. And so he looked himself in the mirror. He said, I got to get better. And that started what is arguably the greatest individual run in NBA history. Arguably. Everybody has their opinion. I said arguably. Don't come crucify me. Or do. I don't care. But he started a fantastic individual run. Came back the next year. MVP. Should have been the depoy. Wait, no. That was the year after. Came back. MVP. Finals. Then the year after. MVP. Finals. Should have been the depoy. Then the year after. Finals appearance again. Second in MVP. Year after, finals appearance again. Ridiculous series versus Andre Iguodala and the Golden State Warriors. Terrible shooting percentage, though. That gets looked over every single time. Don't know why, but great final series. Then the year after, 3-1 comeback. Year after, finals again. Year after, finals again. Most ridiculous performance I've ever seen in a playoff run in my life. If you know, you know. 2018 Braun is ridiculous. Then 2019 Lakers, 4th in the West before he got injured. And then 2020 went to the finals again. Ridiculous run to close out the decade. And he did that off the back of his failure versus the Dallas Mavericks. Setbacks made these two guys. Setbacks made these guys who they were. Yes, they were successful before these setbacks. They were ridiculously successful. 0.00001% of their craft, of the world, they were that successful. But even they required setbacks. And so I want you to take this in mind whenever you are dealing with any sort of setback. Maybe you have a financial burden that you have to cover. Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you got into a fight with somebody that turned out to be a little bit messier than you expected. Maybe you got laid off. Maybe the job market is shifting below your feet. Maybe the city is changing in ways that you don't like. Setbacks, changes, shifts in terrain. This is part of life. The world in 90 years will be completely different than it is now, irrevocably so. And so I want you to remember the lives of these two NBA players and even look to the lives of great entrepreneurs, great investors, or just the people in your inner circle, just the people in your own community. Look to the things that they have overcome and how they've gotten better because of it. See, Machiavelli made this very clear in his book, The Prince, where he said that princes, queens, kings, people of power, they needed crises. They needed setbacks. They needed unfavorable circumstances to prove their skill, to prove that they were the men and women for the job. They needed these things because if a prince or a princess or a king or a queen didn't have a set of terrible circumstances, if they weren't presented a bad hand, they couldn't showcase the requisite skill to get themselves out of that corner, to get themselves out of that foxhole, to get them out of that trap. Both are required. You cannot show your skill without having a circumstance that is so bad that you need X amount of skill to get out of it. They go together. That's what you see in Kobe Bryant. That's what you see in LeBron. That's what you see in every great founder. That's what you see in every great startup. That's what you see in every tycoon of industry, every conqueror, every warrior, every single person who's done anything great who's ever fucking lived. They needed setbacks. And I can tell you in my own life that I have learned a lot by failing. And I've learned a lot more by failing than I have through winning. In fact, winning doesn't really teach me that much. It teaches me to be humble more than anything now because I know that winning can stop at any time. Things can go sideways at any time. They can go south very quickly. And you never know when you're going to be on top and when you're going to be on bottom and when you're going to be in the middle. Most of the time it's the middle. Sometimes it's the two extremes. But winning more so teaches me every time that I do win, anytime that I win a basketball game, anytime that I make a good piece of content, or anytime I have a good time out or make some money, it teaches me to stay humble because, truthfully, we don't control the external circumstances. We don't know what's going on in our psychology all the time. We don't know when there are forces within us looking to undermine our own progress. We don't know these things. We're not aware of it all. And we'll call these forces gods and goddesses, demons. We'll call them shadowy figures, whatever it may be, but they are working. And I see humility as the greatest source of strength here. Humility that life can always be worse, but the gratitude that it's not as bad as it could be. And also the confidence to realize that, look, you've gotten through stuff before, you'll get through it again, as long as it is literally not debilitating to the point where you are on critical mass, you're going to get out of it. And that sounds corny, but it's true. You've seen it in people, you've seen it in great careers, you've seen it in people in your own circle. It is the truth. So I want you to remember that whenever you're facing a crisis, whenever you're facing a setback. This is part of the story. This is part of your journey upwards. This is part of ascending the mountain. If you can get through this, you're going to reach a new high. And then you'll be more prepared for the next crisis. Because really, that's all life is. If you want to look at it through this lens, life is a series of crises. They get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you have to be able to deal with each one as you go along the journey. If you can't, you fall. And if you fall and don't get up, the game's over. And even though you may hate the game, you're still playing it. So I don't think you want it to end as much as you think you do. With that being said, if you gained value out of this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. This is the New Da Vinci. Much love, peace, adios.